Adolf Hitler, the Führer of the German Third Reich, announced his views and his hatred of Jews to Germans and to Europe between 1925 and 1927, writing and publishing a book entitled Mein Kampf, My Struggle. At the end of the 1930s, there were 6 concentration camps in Germany. By 1939, almost 170,000 citizens of the Third Reich had passed through them. The Second World War broke out on the 1st of September 1939. Germany's Drang nach Osten, the march to the east, had begun. The SS and police, responsible for bringing German order to the eastern lands, began looking for a place for a concentration camp in the occupied territory of Poland. The camp was to be designated not for German opponents of Hitler, but only for a subhuman race, the Poles. In 1939, Auschwitz was a small industrial town, but also a major railroad junction. Infantry and mounted artillery barracks were located here. The Germans chose these barracks as a site for a concentration camp, the Death Factory. The final decision to establish a camp in Auschwitz was made in April 1940. The Germans named it Konzentrationslager Auschwitz. The memory of the extermination camp is still vivid in Auschwitz 65 years later. The memory is contained in the soil, in the thousands of testimonies that survivors of the extermination submitted, in drawings, as well as in paintings created years later. The first chapter of From the Auschwitz Chronicle is the story of the longest roll call in the camp's history, a roll call that showed what the future held, what the rules here would be.
I lived in Auschwitz and was employed in the camp as an electrician in a group of civilian employees. In mid-June 1940, the first transport of Polish prisoners arrived at the camp. A couple of days later, several of them were assigned to help us. We brought them food and arranged correspondence with the outside world. After getting to know them better, we decided to help them escape, which was possible at that time, because the camp was not yet completely fenced in, and there was an inadequate number of guards. The prisoner, Tadeusz Wajowski, from Tarnów, agreed to our offer to help him escape. On Saturday the 6th of July 1940, he came to our room in Barrack 15, changed into the work clothes of my co-worker, Józef Patek, put on an armband that we wore as civilian workers, and left with us by a side exit in the direction of the Auschwitz train station. We gave Wajowski money and food. He got on a freight train and left in the direction of Spitkowice. I worked on building the first crematorium until Wajowski's escape. The roll call began at about 6 p.m. It was confirmed that a young 18-year-old prisoner from room number 7 of our barrack was missing. This made a huge impression on us. It was then that we heard the camp siren for the first time. All prisoners in the camp were lined up. At that time, there was about 1,500 of us. Fritsch, the camp commandant, told us that we were criminals and that we would stand here for 3 days and 3 nights. Grabner, the head of the political department, announced that we would stand here until the details of the escape were known. The SS were on high alert in connection with the escape of the prisoner. They took out their rage on his fellow prisoners for ruining their Saturday night, and no doubt for their Sunday as well. We were ordered to stand motionless, at attention, or crouching with arms extended in front of us until our muscles totally gave out. The capo and SS men wandered through the rows, inflicting blows with sticks, one after the other, on the head and arms. From time to time we were hit in the side. The SS men and capo walked along the rows, lining them up with the help of sticks. I was hit on the back of the head with a stick by a German capo, who brought me, swaying from fatigue, back to consciousness with a blow and the words, "Good day." After a sweltering day, a cold night arrived. A chilly wind blew from the Sowa River. Saturday was laundry day for underwear. All of the prisoners were wearing only the camp denim clothing. We were terribly cold the entire night. It got colder and colder as the night wore on. We couldn't stop our teeth from chattering. The SS men took turns guarding us. We continued standing. We crouched with our hands locked behind our heads. We were lit up by searchlights, and the SS men watched us closely so that none of us lowered our arms, and when we did so, out of fatigue and exhaustion, we were beaten mercilessly. All of the older and weaker prisoners had lost consciousness in the first 6 hours. People dropped like flies from fatigue. Water was then poured on them, and they were beaten. Some experienced a strange paralysis in the hands, particularly my mate, Dr. Surush Bakleda. In the middle of the night, we heard the voice of a translator coming from the window of the block, telling us about the promise made by Fritsch, who said that if the people who helped Vejovsky escape come forward, the punishment will be reduced. 5 young prisoners from room 7 stepped forward. These 5 prisoners did not return to the roll call area. We continued standing. Due to the fact that the escapee had not been found by midnight, Hoss, the camp commandant, ordered the roll call to continue another 6 hours, to 6 a.m. From midnight, we stood at attention. They were going to shoot every 15th prisoner. The SS man who guarded us went down the rows counting out. They thought that the prisoners, hungry, thirsty, and at their wits' end, would say something about the escape. The SS men selected 20 prisoners who were to be executed because of the escape. I was among them. Suddenly, a commotion arose when one of the prisoners passed out from fatigue. The SS men ran in his direction. Taking advantage of the situation, Hila, an engineer standing behind me, grabbed and pulled me back into the ranks of the prisoners. It worked. Nobody noticed. Those who needed to leave the ranks to relieve themselves due to fear and the countless hours of standing had a dreadful time. This was just not possible during the roll call. Many prisoners could no longer control their bodily functions and relieved themselves where they stood. The prisoners relieved themselves in their pants or where they stood. For this, they were beaten with rubber whips. The barrack leaders and capos showed off in front of the SS men with the most inventive, ghastly jokes. I remember Count Bavorowski, who at that time was a camp translator. They pulled him out of the ranks and, using a piece of paper he was given, ordered him to take out of his pants what he had done in them, lay down with his nose smeared in his own excrement, and bark like a dog. In the morning, many of the prisoners had passed out. They poured buckets of cold water over them, and if this didn't help, they were taken to the barracks. I carried the unconscious prisoners in order to move and warm up. At 6 a.m., the escaped prisoner, despite a search, had still not been found. Commandant Hoss ordered us to continue standing until 12 noon. After a cold night, a sweltering day dawned. We began to weaken and lose consciousness. People fell over, wailing and writhing in pain. Since 10 a.m., the sun beat down on our heads. I saw people whose heads were swollen like pumpkins, and their eyes were almost invisible under their bulging, swollen foreheads. Increasingly, more prisoners began dropping from the heat, thirst, and weakness. Some prisoners suffered from sunstroke. I personally experienced some visions. I thought wild animals were coming out of the ground. We stood among horrible wailing. Some howled and many swore, cursing God and the Pope. At noon, Commandant Hoss summoned a camp doctor, SS Hauptsturmführer Papiersch, who walked among the ranks and ordered the end of the roll call at 2 p.m. Finally, when no more than 10 prisoners were left standing under their own strength in the roll call area, the order came to return to the barracks. The square on which we stood looked like an awful battlefield, stinking of human waste. We left holding each other up under the arms. My head and neck were extremely swollen. I couldn't take off my pants and had to cut them open. The roll call resulted in many fits of madness, and almost every prisoner's head was smashed by a capo. Many of the prisoners did not return to the barracks because they died as a result of exhaustion, heart failure, sunstroke, and beatings. I prayed continuously. It helped me to survive those 20 hours. About 2 p.m., We were given kohlrabi leaves and several pieces of potatoes to eat. They left us alone for the rest of the day. The next day we were forced to perform superhuman work at a construction yard. We had to run with bags of cement and bricks, beaten and driven by capos. Sunday, the SS men patrolled Oswiecim and the surrounding area and searched homes. I realized that they were looking for the escaped prisoner. Nevertheless, not wanting to create any suspicions, I went to work on Monday. About 9:30 a.m., we were ordered to a barrack next to the crematorium. There were about 20 of us, all electricians. We were told to form a semicircle, and then the prisoners, Popovich and Baran, were brought into the barrack. Hoss ordered them to pick out the guilty. Popovich fingered me and Emil Kowalowski. Baran, Mushinsky, Patek, and Mishugut. We were taken to the headquarters building. Hoss told us that if we didn't confess, our families would be brought to the camp and tortured in front of us until we confessed. I found out that Popovich said that I brought the prisoners food, that I told them the Germans would lose the war, and that before the escape, I spoke with Wejowski. I confessed to the first 2 charges against me, but not to speaking with Wejowski. We were later interrogated in the tobacco monopoly building. The SS men beat us with their fists and whips. We were not given any food for 7 days, not even water. After these 7 days, we were given prisoners' uniforms and, as prisoners, were assigned to Barrack 4. At the beginning of November 1940, my name and the names of the 4 other prisoners were called out during the evening roll call. Hoss, in the company of Grabner and other SS men, read out our sentence. He condemned us to death, but Himmler pardoned us and changed the death penalty to 5 years in a concentration camp and 3 floggings of 25 lashes each. A thick electric cable covered with leather was used. After the flogging, each of us was forced to stand at attention and report to Hoss that the punishment had been administered. We were then taken to the bunker at Barrack 11, where we sat for 21 days without any food or water. Out of hunger and thirst, we licked the condensation on the walls and drank from the waste bucket. Our wounds festered and abscessed from the beatings. After 21 days, hospital orderlies carried us out in the evening on stretchers. They took us to the square in front of Barrack 16, where in the presence of Hoss, Grabner, and the capo Krankenmann, we were each beaten with a stick 50 times. In accordance with the sentence, the electricians arrested in the case of Wejowski's escape received 50 lashes. We were forced to assist in administering the punishment. I was unconscious for 2 weeks. I woke up in a room with 36 corpses. At my request, Tadeusz Gonczarowski, a prison doctor, carried me to another room and looked after me. I found myself in the hospital. Beach was laying in the corner of the room. I saw the wounds on his backside. He laid there 7 months. When my condition improved, I was taken out of the hospital. On the 8th of June 1941, I was transported by train to the concentration camp in Mauthausen-Gusen, where I survived until the liberation of that camp by the American Army in 1945. Among those arrested with me, Mushinsky, Kowalowski, and Patek were killed in 1941 in the Gusen concentration camp, where they were transported from Oswiecim. Miszkut died during the transport as a result of wounds he received during the flogging. That gave us a taste of what awaited us in Oswiecim. But we also had hope that the war would end in several months, and we held on. The roll call area looked a little different then. The fence was temporary. Those poplars were planted much later, in the fall of 1940, and they never had leaves. When buds appeared, the prisoners ate them. We were always hungry.